When a woman is about 9 months pregnant, her uterus holds a baby and is called a gravid uterus at term. Inside the uterus, the placenta is stuck to the wall and is connected to the baby by the umbilical cord. The placenta acts like a delivery and waste station. It sends nutrients from the mother to the baby and takes away waste from the baby to the mother. To understand how the placenta works, imagine looking at it from the side in a cross-section. Blood from the mother comes to special uterine blood vessels called spiral arteries. These arteries pass through a layer called the decidua to reach the placenta. Once there, the mother's blood flows into open spaces in the placenta called the intervillous space, then leads through veins called endometrial veins. Inside the placenta, there are tiny tree branch-like structures called placental villi. These villi carry the baby's blood through little blood vessels. The area of the placenta where these villi live is called the chorion, and the names placental villi and chorionic villi mean the same thing. The outside of each villus, that's the singular of villi, is covered in trophoblast cells. Inside the villus are blood vessels from the baby, which come from the umbilical arteries and go back through the umbilical vein. Even though the mother's blood surrounds the villi, it never actually touches the baby's blood. That's because the trophoblast layer acts like a barrier to keep them separate. If we zoom in under a microscope and look closely at a single villus, we'll see that the mother's and baby's blood are separated by this trophoblast layer. For most of the pregnancy, the trophoblast has two parts: the syncytiotrophoblast on the outside, which touches the mother's blood, and the cytotrophoblast underneath, which touches the walls of the baby's tiny blood vessels. Just to keep things simple in this explanation, we're leaving out one more thin layer, the lining of the baby's blood vessels, which normally sits between the trophoblast and the baby's blood. As pregnancy moves along, a layer in the placenta called the cytotrophoblast slowly shrinks. By the time the baby is full term, there's only one thin layer of cells left between the mother's blood and the baby's blood vessels. This is important for oxygen to move across easily. Oxygen flows from the mother's blood into the baby's blood through the trophoblast layer. Why? Because the mother's blood has more oxygen pressure, called partial pressure, than the baby's blood. So oxygen naturally spreads out from where there's more to where there's less, like how the smell of cookies spreads from the kitchen to the rest of the house. This kind of movement, where molecules cross on their own without needing help, is called passive diffusion. But not everything works like that. Nutrients like food for the baby can't pass through so easily. They need help from the placenta to get across the cell layers. Let's focus on one of the most important nutrients, glucose, which is sugar and gives energy to the baby. If we zoom in even closer under a super strong microscope, we can see the mother's blood, the outer wall of the placenta cells, and inside that, the cytoplasm, or the jelly-like part of the cell. The outer wall, or cell membrane, is made of two layers of fatty materials called phospholipids. Now here's the catch. Glucose is water-loving, and fat and water don't mix, so glucose can't pass through the fatty membrane on its own. To help it get through, glucose uses a special protein built into the cell membrane. This protein acts like a gate or a helper tunnel that lets glucose pass through safely. Since glucose gets help crossing, this process is called facilitated diffusion. The special transport proteins in the placenta help glucose move both into and out of the trophoblast cells. Once glucose gets through, it crosses into the baby's tiny blood vessels and enters the fetal bloodstream. Other important nutrients, like amino acids, building blocks of protein, fatty acids, and iron also pass through the placenta using these helper proteins. From the tiny blood vessels inside the villi, oxygen and nutrients travel to the umbilical vein, and from there, they move through the umbilical cord into the baby's body. Once inside, these nutrients and oxygen are sent all over to the heart, brain, and every other organ and tissue the baby is growing. At the same time, the baby's waste products, including carbon dioxide, move in the opposite direction. They travel from the baby back to the placenta through the umbilical arteries. Now here's something interesting. With carbon dioxide, the pressure is reversed compared to oxygen. The baby's blood has more carbon dioxide pressure than the mother's, so carbon dioxide flows out of the baby's blood and across the placenta into the mother's blood again, using passive diffusion, just like oxygen, but in the other direction. This process also makes it easier for the baby's blood to let go of carbon dioxide once it starts picking up oxygen. When the baby's blood becomes full of oxygen, called oxyhemoglobin, it naturally releases carbon dioxide back into the mother's circulation. Other waste products, like urea, uric acid, and creatinine, also leave the baby's blood and cross into the mother's blood. This happens because of concentration gradients, which is just a fancy way of saying, if there's more waste in the baby's blood than in the mother's, the waste will move toward the mother's side until it balances out. This principle is similar to how oxygen and carbon dioxide follow pressure gradients to move between mother and baby. Besides all of this, the placenta also has another big job. It makes hormones that help the baby grow and keep the pregnancy healthy. Here's just a short list of some of the hormones made by the placenta. And to make them, the placenta uses materials it gets from either the mother or the baby.